Well, this video is going to take a high-level overview of when, why, how, and where people do or do not buy a particular product or service. And I'm going to be looking at the purchase decision, post-purchase evaluation, internal and external influences, as well as strategy. Alright, so introduction to consumer behavior. Consumer behavior can be described as the study of groups, organizations, or individuals, and these processes that they use to select, secure, and dispose of products or services to satisfy the needs and the impacts of these processes that they have on consumers and our society. Now, these are influenced by items like culture, subculture, your location or locality, an individual's ethnicity, their family background, social class, past experience, different reference groups, their lifestyle, and a whole marketing mix of different factors inside that market. And most areas of consumer behavior, including everything from lighting and music to behavior of how products are consumed, these have been studied by researchers in marketing. And this isn't all that surprising considering the fact that we live in a consumption-driven culture. So you need to understand why consumers think and act the way they do. And this can be done by recognizing and identifying the internal and external influences that your consumers encounter or customers encounter on a daily basis. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the purchase decision, post-purchase evaluation, and finally internal and external influences, as well as some strategy. Now, the purchase decision process. Now, the customer purchase decision process is a series of steps that a customer typically goes through in making a decision to purchase a product or a service. And the whole process will often take seconds or minutes, and in many cases can take as long as years. So regardless of how long the decision it takes, consumers generally go through 5 different steps when making a purchase decision. And that would be 1, the problem or the need recognition, 2, an information search, 3, alternative evaluation, 4, purchase decision and action, and then 5, post-purchase evaluation. Alright, first one, problem recognition. The problem or need recognition, it really ignites the entire decision process. And at this stage, the consumer or customer recognizes a problem or a need, like, I'm feeling hungry, or we need a new bed, or my gosh, I got a big headache, and then they respond to a marketing stimulus. Now, for example, like if you see a commercial for shoes and you suddenly remember that you needed a new pair of shoes. Well, a stimulated customer will then decide how much information, if any, is required to make that purchase. And if the need is strong and the product or service that meets the need is close at hand, then they'll most likely make a purchase decision, and it will be made right there and then. If not, the consumer or customer will begin to research the product or service to gather more information. And now, information search. If the consumer did not feel comfortable in making a decision without researching the product, then they will start to search around for further information on the product or service. And a customer will obtain information from several different likely sources, like personal sources, family, friends, neighbors, different commercial sources like advertising, salespeople, different retailers, dealers, packaging, different public sources like newspapers, magazines, television, internet, and experimental sources like handling the product itself or holding it. And the influence of these sources are going to vary with each product or service. And research has suggested that the customer value and respect for their personal sources, or like word of mouth rather than, say, commercial sources, bear a lot more weight. And the challenge here is for the marketing team to determine which source is going to be most influential to the consumer. Now, evaluation of the alternatives, after researching several different competing brands, the consumer is going to evaluate the alternatives based on the information that they've collected. Now, like in the first instance, the consumer is going to select an evoked set, which is the group of products that would most likely closely meet their needs. And typically, a consumer will use these cutoffs to establish this evoked set. These are the minimums and the maximum acceptable values for any product characteristic. Now, signals are important when making these choices, like a brand name, a particular price tag, or even the retailer or a supplier will have some effect on the customer or consumer's perception. And now price is frequently used as an indicator of quality. For example, this can reduce the presence of other signals that may be involved in the process. So occasionally the use of cutoffs eliminates all the possibilities from this evoked set, in which case the consumer will have to revise the rules that they've put forth for their evoked set. And for marketers, often the challenge is to ensure that the product becomes a part of that evoked set. So the decision-making process appears complex and lengthy, but most of us make several purchasing decisions in a day without going through the lengthy decision-making process. And this is because most of us have a set of rules for most purchases. These are simple if-then rules that reduce the risk by looking at or using previous experiences as a guide. Okay, so now the purchase decision and the action that goes along with it. Now, once all the alternatives have been evaluated, the customer or the consumer is ready to make that purchase decision. And sometimes purchase intentions do not result in an actual purchase. The marketing team must truly facilitate the customer or consumer to act on that purchasing decision. Do customers make their purchasing decision all by themselves? Not at all. I mean, there are many factors that influence the purchasing decision. Sometimes when you're dealing with larger businesses, there may be a group that's together, or there may be certain vacations that hinder that purchase decision. So although these elements in the marketing mix, or those elements that are most prevalent, there are also other secondary strong psychological factors that influence the consumer both internally and externally. And so if a purchase takes place, it's probable that the consumer made a decision based on a conscious process. All right, post-purchase evaluation. This refers to the way that consumers decide whether the product purchased has been a success or not. And this process usually involves a comparison between the product purchased and the expectations the consumers had of that said product. So before purchasing, the consumer or customer has expectations of the product's capabilities in terms of things like reasonable performance, what can be reasonably expected to give, given the cost and the effort of getting that product, or ideal performance, what the consumer hopes the product will do, and expected performance. And that's what the product will probably do. So sometimes this evaluation leads to what is sometimes called buyer's remorse. And sometimes the product exceeds the customer's expectations. In either event, the consumer will store this information in memory and keep it handy for the information search next time. You've got to think of this when you're dealing with companies that have dealt with other vendors that are in your niche. So from a marketing viewpoint, it is generally better to ensure that the consumer has accurate information about the product beforehand to avoid this post-purchase dissonance. During the SEO sales trail, and we talk about this with education-based marketing. So the most effective way of reducing this post-purchase disconnection is to provide a product that meets the customer's expectations. Now, the influences on the buying process. There are three main factors that can influence the purchasing process. First, you've got personal factors. Next, we've got psychological factors. And three, your social factors. Okay, first, personal factors. These are really unique to a particular person. And these items can be items like demographics, or the individual's sex, or their age, or race, or finally religion. Now, psychological factors, these might include items like the motives, which is the internal energizing force, such as safety or love and esteem, that really drives a consumer's activity towards satisfying their need that we were talking about. Or perhaps perception, or how the consumer views the information given about a particular product or service, their ability and their knowledge with that particular product or service. Personality. And these traits, they're really unique to everyone. Marketers need to match the product image to the perceived image of the unique customer. And finally, lifestyle. And now moving on to social factors. This might include spokespeople, different reference groups, social class, culture, or their subculture. And understanding the buying process is not only going to help you market your own product better, it will ideally help increase your sales, but more importantly, it's going to help your customers.
That concludes this local marketing update from the Local Marketing Source Professional Development Program for local marketers. Visit localmarketingsource.com for additional resources focused on online marketing for local businesses.